You've been doing everything right for 2 years. You cut back. You budgeted. You transferred money into savings every single paycheck like clockwork. And you finally crossed $5,000 saved. Maybe $8,000. Maybe you're still grinding toward that first $10. 000. And it feels like you're climbing a wall with wet hands. And meanwhile, you hear stories about people flipping $50,000 into $80, 0 in a few years. Investors growing portfolios by 6 figures. And you're sitting there thinking, how? I'm working just as hard. I'm being just as disciplined. Why does every dollar I save feel like I'm dragging it uphill with my teeth, while these people seem to be rolling downhill collecting money? Here's what nobody tells you. You're not doing it wrong. You're just in the hardest part. And there is a real mathematical, psychological reason why your first $20,000 is harder than the next $200,000. Once you understand it, I mean really understand it, everything changes. My name is Karen, and I know what it feels like to stare at a savings account that barely moves no matter how much you sacrifice, skipping trips, saying no to yourself constantly, doing the responsible thing over and over again, and still feeling like you're going nowhere, like the finish line keeps moving, like wealth is something that happens to other people, and you're just watching from outside the window. I built this channel because I needed someone to tell me the truth about how money actually works. Not the Instagram version, not the just invest bro version, the real version. So if this video helps you see what I finally had to see, make sure you hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who are in the exact same fight. All right, let's talk about why the first $20,000 is the hardest money you will ever save, and why, once you get past it, the whole game quietly changes. Part 1. The math shows. Let's start with the numbers because this is where everything clicks. You earn $50,000 a year. After taxes, let's say you take home around $3,800 a month. You're disciplined. You manage to save $400 a month, which, by the way, is more than most Americans. The Federal Reserve's 2023 report on the economic well-being of U.S. households found that 37% of Americans couldn't cover a $400 emergency expense without borrowing. So saving $400 consistently? That's genuinely impressive. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. But here's the thing. At $400 a month, it takes you 4 years and 2 months to save your first $20,000. Assuming zero interest growth, because we're starting this journey in a low balance account where the numbers haven't kicked in yet, 4 years, for $20,000. That is a long, slow, deeply unglamorous grind now. Let's say you've hit $100,000 invested, maybe in a mix of index funds and a high-yield account, earning an average return of 8%, which is below the S&P 500's historical average. In year one at $100,000, that 8% return generates $8,000 for you, passively, without you doing a single extra thing. That's 20 months of your 400 SMARE savings in 1 year, from money you already accumulated. At $200,000, that same 8% generates $16,000 a year. 40 months of disciplined saving, 3.5 years of sacrifice, happening automatically in 12 months. This is why it feels different. It's not your imagination. It's not a mindset problem. It's math. The engine hasn't turned on yet. Here's what most people don't realize. The first $20,000 is the engine. Everything else is fuel. And before your engine turns on, every mile is pedal power, pure human effort. That's why it's exhausting. You are manually pushing a car that isn't running yet. Leonard Part 2. The psychology of starting from zero. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because it's not just math making this hard. Your brain is actively working against you at the beginning, in ways that are completely predictable and almost nobody talks about. There's a psychological principle called hyperbolic discounting. It sounds fancy, but the concept is this. Humans are wired to value rewards in the present far more heavily than identical rewards in the future. And the further away the future reward is, the more we discount it. Not linearly, but hyperbolically, steeply, irrationally. What this means in practice is when you have two doors, 0 saved, and you're staring down a Vorverfesten to get to $20,000 in dollars, your brain can't emotionally feel how valuable that $20,000 will be. It just feels far, distant, abstract, and the sacrifice you're making right now, the dinner you didn't go to, the vacation you didn't take, that's immediate and real and painful. So your brain does a very logical, very human thing. It whispers, is this even worth it? And this is where most people quit. Not because they lack discipline, not because they're irresponsible, but because the emotional return on investment in the early phase is negative. You're paying a psychological cost right now for a benefit that won't materialize in a way you can feel for years. Now, you might be thinking, Karen, I know saving is important. I just can't afford to save more. And I hear that. I'm not dismissing real financial constraints. But I want to gently challenge one assumption, and I'll come back to it. Part 3. The comparison trap that makes it worse look. There's something that makes all of this even harder in the modern era, and I'd be doing you a disservice if I didn't address it directly. Social media has given us 24/7 access to people in different phases of their wealth-building journey, and we almost always compare our beginning to someone else's middle or end. Someone posts about their investment returns, and you don't see the 8 years of grinding that preceded it. You see the highlight, the result, the number. And psychologically, this triggers something researchers call relative deprivation. The feeling of being disadvantaged, not because of your absolute situation, but because of how your situation compares to others. A study published in the journal Psychological Science found that feelings of relative deprivation are a stronger predictor of financial risk-taking than actual financial need. In plain English, people take dumb financial risks not because they're actually desperate, but because they feel behind. This matters because it explains a pattern I see constantly. Someone has $8,000 saved, which is remarkable, genuinely, but they feel so far behind compared to what they see online that they do something rash. They throw it into a single speculative stock. They get into crypto they don't understand. They take risks with their one financial cushion because the slow path feels humiliating when everyone online seems to be sprinting. I need you to hear this clearly. Blowing up your first $10,000 doesn't just cost you $10,000. It costs you the compound growth on that $10,000 for the next 30 years. At 8% over 30 years, $10,000 becomes $100,626. So that impulsive bet, it's not a $10,000 mistake. It's a six-figure mistake. Protect your foundation like it's irreplaceable, because mathematically it is. Part 4. The 3 phases of wealth building. Here's the framework I want you to internalize, because this is the thing that finally made the early grind make sense to me. Wealth building doesn't happen in a straight line. It happens in 3 distinct phases, and almost nobody describes them honestly. Phase 1. The friction zones, $0 to $25, 0. This is the hardest phase. Everything is manual. Every dollar in your account got there because you chose it over something else. Your savings rate, how much you save as a percentage of your income, is the only lever you have. There's no engine running yet. Investment returns at this stage are real but small enough to feel invisible. $5,000 at 8% is $400 a year, $33 a month. It barely registers. The psychological weight of this phase is real, and it is disproportionate to how long it actually lasts, relative to your full, wealth-building lifetime. Here's what I need you to hold on to. Most people who abandon their financial plan do so in phase 1. They quit before the engine turns on. They quit in the hardest part, just before the math starts to work. Phase 2, the ignition phase, $25, 0 to $100,000. This is where something shifts. It's subtle at first. You might not notice it immediately, but your investment returns start to become visible. At $50,000, 8% is $4,000 a year. $333 a month. That's meaningful. It starts to feel like you have a financial partner working alongside you instead of dragging alone. The psychological shift in this phase is significant. Momentum becomes real. Checking your account starts to feel exciting rather than discouraging. And that emotional feedback loop, finally getting a positive return on your attention, changes behavior. People in phase 2 tend to naturally increase their savings rate because the visible progress is motivating. Phase 3, the compounding phase, $100,000 and beyond this is where the game changes entirely. At $100,000 at OS, your money is generating $8,000 a year at 8%. At $150,000, it's $12,000. At $250,000, it's $20,000. That's more than the median American saves in an entire year, coming from passive growth on what you've already built. This is where the rich get richer stops being a cynical observation and starts being a mathematical reality. It's not that wealthy people are working harder or making smarter decisions. It's that they have enough capital deployed that the returns themselves begin to compound into more returns. The important thing to understand is this: you cannot skip to phase 3. There is no shortcut through phase 1, and the people who try to shortcut it, the get-rich-quick schemes, the leveraged gambles, the speculative bets, almost universally wipe out their phase 1 capital and have to start over, sometimes more than once. Phase 1 is not a waiting room. It is the foundation. You are building the engine. Seliso Part 5. How to get through phase 1 faster and saner. Okay. So knowing all of this, how do you actually survive phase 1 without losing your mind? First, automate everything and stop watching. Here's the thing. One of the biggest hidden costs of phase 1 is the emotional tax of watching your account not grow fast enough. Every time you log in and feel disappointed, you're making the psychological burden heavier than it needs to be. Automate your savings transfer on payday. Set it and genuinely stop watching it every week. I'm serious. A Vanguard study found that investors who checked their portfolios the least frequently had better outcomes than those who monitored frequently. Not just emotionally, but financially, because they made fewer reactive decisions. Set a monthly check-in. That's it. The money is working. You watching it doesn't make it work faster. Second, reframe what $20,000 actually represents. Most people think of $20,000 as a number. I want you to think of it as a financial entity. A worker you hired who will show up every single day for the rest of your life, earning you money whether you work or not. At 8%, your $20,000 worker generates $1,600 a year indefinitely. It doesn't call in sick. It doesn't ask for a raise. It just works. Every dollar you add to your savings isn't you depriving yourself. It's you hiring more workers. Every $1 you add is a part-time financial employee who generates $80 a year every year for as long as you keep them employed. Change how you see the sacrifice, and the sacrifice becomes something else entirely. Third, increase your savings rate by even 1% per year. Research by behavioral economist Shlomo Benartzi, the architect of the Save More Tomorrow program used by major 401 providers, found that people who committed to increasing their savings rate by just 1 to 2% per year, timed to coincide with pay raises, dramatically outperformed those who set a fixed savings amount. Why? Because the increase happens before the raise becomes lifestyle. You never feel the loss. If you earn $50,000 and currently save 8%, committing to 9% next year and 10% the year after doesn't feel like sacrifice. But the compounding difference over 20 years is staggering. Going from 8% to 12% savings rate over 4 years on a $50,000 income shortens your phase 1 by roughly 18 months, a year and a half. That is not a small thing. Fourth, make your phase 1 milestone visible and meaningful. Here's what most people don't realize about motivation. We are terrible at staying motivated for abstract, distant goals. We are much better at staying motivated for concrete, proximate milestones. The brain releases dopamine for visible progress. not for progress towards something invisible. So instead of telling yourself, I'm building wealth, make your $5,000 milestone a moment. Make $10,000 a moment you acknowledge. Make $20, something you genuinely celebrate. Not with spending, but with recognition. Write it down, say it out loud, tell someone you trust. The ritual signals to your brain, this mattered, this was real, and that psychological reinforcement is the fuel that keeps you going through the hardest stretch. Part 6. The insight nobody wants to say out loud. I want to say something that sounds almost cruel, but I believe is actually the most empowering thing in this video. The reason phase 1 is so hard isn't just math and it isn't just psychology. It's also time. And time is the one resource you cannot manufacture, borrow, or replace. Every year you delay starting phase 1, not delay finishing, delay starting, has a specific calculable cost. Let me make it concrete. If you're 25 and you start phase 1 today, working toward $20, zero zeros in over 4 years, and then you let that compound for 36 more years to age 65 at 8%, that $20,000 becomes $304,880. If you wait until 30 to start, just 5 years, and do the exact same thing, that same $20,000, compounded at 8% for 31 years to age 65, becomes $207,280. The 5-year delay costs you $97,600, nearly $100,000, from 5 years of waiting. Now here's the part that I genuinely wish someone had told me earlier. If you're 25, 28, 30, or even 35, and you haven't started yet, or you started and stopped, the answer is not shame. The answer is not regret. The answer is start now, today, with whatever you have. Because the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. But I do want you to feel the weight of waiting. Not as punishment, as motivation. Every month you're not building phase 1, the future version of you is quietly losing ground. And future you doesn't get a vote in today's decision. Only present you does. This is where it gets really interesting. Because once you internalize this, phase 1 stops feeling like a punishment and starts feeling like an advantage. You're building the thing right now that future you will live off of. You're hiring the workers right now who will show up for decades. You're laying the tracks right now that the train will eventually run on with, or without your continued effort. That is not deprivation. That is power. Let me bring this full circle. Your first $20,000 is harder than the next $200. Zero for 3 compounding reasons, and I want to make sure you walk away with all 3 locked in. 1. The math hasn't activated yet. Small balances produce small returns that feel invisible. You are doing 100% of the work with 0% of the compounding assistance. That's the engine before ignition reality. It is genuinely, measurably harder, and it will not always be this hard. 2. Your brain is fighting you. Hyperbolic discounting makes the future feel abstract. Relative deprivation from social media makes your real progress feel inadequate. And the absence of visible feedback makes motivation fragile. None of this is a personal failing. It's human wiring. Knowing it exists is how you work around it. 3. Time is the silent variable nobody wants to talk about. Every dollar you build in phase 1 doesn't just matter today. It matters in 10, 20, 30 years in a way that no future dollar ever will. The dollars you build right now, in this phase, are your most valuable financial assets. Not because of what they are, but because of what they become. You are not behind. You are not failing. You are in the hardest part of the most important journey of your financial life. And most people never push through it, which means every single day you keep going, you're separating yourself from the majority. I want to end with something that I think about a lot. There's a study from the Journal of Financial Planning that found the single biggest predictor of long-term wealth accumulation wasn't income. It wasn't investment returns. It wasn't even savings rate. It was consistency, specifically not stopping during the early, unrewarding phase of accumulation. The people who built real wealth weren't the ones who were the most brilliant, or the most frugal, or the most lucky. They were the ones who stayed in phase 1 long enough to get to phase 2. That's it. That's the whole secret. The treadmill is the hardest when you first get on it. The weight is heaviest in the first rep. The first mile is the most miserable. But every single person who has built financial independence went through exactly what you're going through right now. Every single one. The difference between the people who made it and the people who didn't isn't talent. It isn't timing. It's this. They didn't quit in the unglamorous middle. You're here. You're watching. You're in the fight. And I genuinely believe that if you apply even one thing from this video, automate your savings, reframe what your money represents, increase your rate by 1% this year, make your milestones visible, you will look back at this exact moment as a turning point. Don't wait for the math to get easy before you start. The math gets easy because you started. If this hit home for you, and I hope it did, hit that thumbs up button. It tells the algorithm this content is worth sharing, and it helps someone else who's grinding through phase 1 right now find this video when they need it most. Subscribe if you haven't already. Every week I'm here breaking down the real mechanics of how money works, not the glamorized version, the real one. And drop a comment below. Where are you in phase 1, 2, or 3 right now?